pride, passion, and pageantry of college football lives here. This is the Paul Finebaum Show, Hour 2 podcast.
This might be college football heaven.
We're back, continuing trying to understand a little more about what is going on in college football. It changes by the hour. Headline here from way out west, the Mercury News, CFP expansion, Big Ten SEC scheduling could impact Big 12 and ACC schools for years to come. Jon Wilner joins us. John, good afternoon. Thanks so much. It has been whiplash, getting whiplash trying to figure out what's going on. How are you, and what do you make out of the last couple of days, if not weeks?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul. Continuation of the general insanity that is college football, right? And the off season is now arguably more interesting than in season. Certainly has a big impact on what's going on. I was a little, I kind of figured the Big Ten and the SEC were going to try to push the narrative with the CFP, but for 2026, but they're moving on maybe a little bit faster than I would have thought.
So let's look at not only what they've done, but as you have written about the repercussions. How does it affect the rest of the college sports world?
I mean, I think everything is interconnected these days, and I looked at it. You know, the changes that are going to be proposed for the playoffs starting in 2026 with added teams and with the automatic qualifiers. To me, it's all connected, right? I mean, the SEC and the Big Ten want to play more high-quality games during the season against each other, and for the SEC adding a ninth conference game, right? So I figure those have some value to ESPN and Fox, but you know, that's a chance for, if you're playing a higher level game, there's a chance for another loss, and so I think that what they're doing with the AQs is basically trying to protect themselves against the committee in case they were to get punished for losing an extra game. You know, with the AQs, now those games won't really matter for the selection process.
I'm glad you said that because you can interpret these things any way you want, John, but in some ways it does appear that it is a vote of no confidence in the very committee that they created. Yeah,
they have. I think that's exactly what it is. They don't trust the committee. Nobody quite knows what the criteria are. I mean, it says strength of schedule is like right at the top, but sometimes they don't seem to be following strength of schedule. I mean, and the big part of the committee's problem is the weekly selection shows, right? Because those box the committee in to decisions that it otherwise would not want to make and limit its flexibility when it comes time for the final rankings. If you got rid of some of those shows and follow the NCAA tournament model where there's one preview of the rankings, I think the committee would have a lot more flexibility. But those shows are tied to ESPN, which is tied to the CFP contract. So they can't really get rid of them, I don't think. But it has led to mistrust and apprehension, I think, on the part of the schools and the conferences.
And John, I'll let you answer. I mean, clearly I work for ESPN, and I take part in the day after reaction and screaming and hollering about what happens on Tuesday night. But in terms of a net gain to college football and really even to the CFP rankings and ratings, I should say, I mean, is there any real net advantage of having those shows every Tuesday night?
They generate discussion on social media and on TV, but I think, you know, on the bigger, higher level, I think that they undermine faith in the selection process. I mean, the chair's got to get on there every week and answer questions, and sometimes he comes off looking hypocritical because dynamics change from one week to the next. You got athletic directors hopping on social media, kind of taking shots at each other. You got commissioners, Brett Yormark, Lori Navarez, having to issue public statements about to support their schools and drum up support from the committee. I just don't think that it's good for the sport, but I also think it's good business for ESPN. And if I was ESPN, I'd want those shows too. But that's the whole impossible marriage that college football is in with the big business of sports on television.
Talking to Jon Wilner, who is a rare voice, calm voice in the wilderness here on this subject. John, just in terms of what I know, you explained why the Big Ten and SEC are attempting to do what they are probably going to get away with doing, but how does it play? We've had negative reaction here, and this is primarily an SEC show. How is it playing where you are?
Yeah, everybody is against it. Nobody likes the idea of, the SEC and Big Ten getting 4 bids without playing a game, especially coming off a season where the SEC wasn't up to its usual standard. So, no, it's not playing well, and the two conferences are coming off looking a little bit like bullies. But, again, it's all self-interest. I mean, they're doing what's right for themselves, but that's not necessarily right for the ACC and Big 12 and the Group of 5. It's not necessarily right for the game. But that's what college sports is all about, is self-interest at this point. So it's kind of par for the course, and it could end up having a ripple effect, right? I mean, if you're LSU, there's a year that I think it's 29 or 30, LSU scheduled to play at Utah. If LSU's got to play 9 SEC games, a crossover game against the Big Ten, why would the Tigers also want to go to Salt Lake City? So to me, what could end up happening is all these games that the Big Ten and SEC have scheduled against the ACC and Big 12 down the road are potentially in jeopardy if they get this scheduling alliance sorted out and formalized.
John, outside of hue and cry and criticism and pot shots from various columnists on social media and elsewhere, is there any other real concern that you would have as a fan of the game, as somebody who chronicles it, in terms of where we are going with this, or the horse is already out of the fence and it really doesn't even matter anymore?
No, I'm concerned. I think the AQs could have a big impact on the competitive value of the regular season, to be honest. I mean, college football has got the best regular season in sports, and it's been that way for a long time. But if you got 4, each conference is guaranteed, each of those 2 is guaranteed 4 automatic bids, and then if they're going to play those playing games on championship weekend, so like even the 6th, 7th, or 8th place team in late November has a chance to get in the playoff, I think that there could be real damage to the regular season, and that would be a long-term problem for the sport. And the other thing, Paul, is I don't know where they're going to put the extra playoff games, right? They're already bumping up against the NFL, and to me, the NFL is the greatest existential threat to college football. And if I were college football, I would not be scheduling more games directly against the NFL. I would be doing what I can to work with the NFL and come up with a solution that works for both leagues.
But, John, it feels like that's already happened, and who really? I mean, I know who the power brokers are, as you do. You've written about that quite a bit, including recently. But what can Sankey, Petiti, or anyone for that matter do to get Roger Goodell to change his approach? Because he's already shattered so many norms, such as Black Friday, the Saturday games that devoured the games, the playoff games this year, Christmas games. I mean, there's just no stopping the NFL.
No, there's not. And they've added that Friday game, I think it's in Brazil or somewhere, I agree. The NFL is they're going after every broadcast window they can get. The one thing right now that's standing between them and complete dominance is the Sports Broadcasting Act of, 1960 or 62, right? Would I be shocked if down the road the NFL tried to challenge that law and to be able to play on Friday nights and Saturdays throughout the fall? I wouldn't be that surprised, to be honest with you. I think that they've really got to work to come up with a long-term solution that's going to work for both, because it's just could turn into a massive crisis for college football if the NFL keeps going after what had been broadcast windows reserved for college football.
John, always great to catch up. Jon Wilner with a sobering report on the existential threat that college football is dealing with right now. We'll take a break. Your reaction around the corner.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We are back, continuing with more calls. And what about Johnny B up next?
Hey, Paul, thanks for taking my call. You was mentioning that they left the wine in that fine house you bought. I
Right.
bet you there's some good. Yeah, I bet you there's some good boxes of wine down there. That Franzia, that's some good stuff, and
Okay.
probably
You're gonna
some
have to come over,
Boone's
'cause
Farm
I
and
don't
some.
know French wine, Italian wine, California wine from Mogan David.
Yeah, I like all that old stuff that you have to use a corkscrew. That's outdated. You just want to throw it out. But the Boone's Farm and the Mad Dog, some of that box stuff, that's high dollar.
I know Boone's Farm. I know strawberry wine.
Yep. There you go. Tickle Pink. That was one of them we had back in the day. Today's also 1 year celebration of when I crop dusted Jim in that phoner feud.
Oh,
I just
really?
happened to see that in
That was a year
in
ago
my
today,
memories.
and have we heard from him since?
I don't believe he's ever been the same since then, just to be honest. I feel kind of bad about that. But, I would like for him to give me my boot back and set things right. But one other thing that it happened today.
Remind the audience where that boot is.
It is up Jim's ass, and it's not anymore. He had to go to Druid City Hospital, and they took it out down there. So it's either at DCH or Jim has it as a memento of that beat down I gave him that day. But one other thing I was wanting to mention is I find it ironic that ESPN is canceling their deal with Major League Baseball, freeing up $550 million at the end of 2025 when all this college football stuff shakes loose. Maybe they know something that's coming that we don't know, and they're going to have a bunch of money. What do you think about that?
I never put that one together, but that's why we have you on the show, Johnny B. Thank you very much. So let's check in with Todd in Atlanta.
Hey, Paul. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, sir.
So I'm a longtime listener, man. I've been listening to you probably for 30 years when you were still on terrestrial radio, but haven't called in. I think the last time I called into your show was 97. But you used to do and I can't remember who this guy is. He had a radio show in Alabama, in Florida, and you guys would get together. Was his name David Lamb? And guys would.
It was David Lamb. Sadly, he just died a couple of months ago. He was.
Oh, I was going to ask you if he was still in the air.
He was in Jacksonville. He, like everybody, went from newspapers to radio. We called him Lamb Chops, and he was one of the great characters of all time.
Yeah, he was a delight to listen to. My father lives in Jacksonville, and I would tune him in whenever I was down there, and I was just drawing a blank on that. Yeah, man, like I say, I've been listening for a long time and figured I'd give a call in and just say hello. Congratulations on your new home, and I'll just keep listening, man. Have a good one.
Thank you very much, Todd. Not called in nearly 30 years. We got good retention power here. Vance is up next. Hello, Vance.
Hey, Paul. You can always count on Johnny B. That's all I got to say about that. I love the guy. Paul, I've made these connotations for a few years to you on this show. And my feeling today is these people, whoever they are, running this show, prove with every decision they make that they don't have a clue, not one clue of what they're doing. And one more question. Have they ever asked one of the athletes what they think? Everyone, these guys, what do they want them to do? Play 17, 18 games? Now they're talking about a play-in game? You know, that same thing that happened to Carson Beck in the SEC championship last year can happen against anybody. And that, well, you know, they got to get rid of the SEC championship game. That has been a stalwart for us and the nation since 1992. And it also paved the way for a couple of teams to get into national title games that they wouldn't have got in without it, because the other teams didn't have one, and then everyone went to a championship. Does any of that make sense to you?
Well, it makes perfect sense, but here's the problem, though, Vance. When you literally make it up as you go along, it's very difficult to construct it correctly.
Well, my belief right now is they ought to be ashamed, and the course they're going on is, I believe, a natural course to where it's just going to blow up. It cannot sustain itself. It's going to blow up, and then you got to start all over again. Doesn't that sound like the logical thing that's going to happen?
Well, I mean, on one level, maybe, but it's also a matter of who can survive. And at the root of a lot of this is the mismanagement overall of college athletics, namely the NCAA, which forced NIL legislation to start at the state level, and a lack of a universal federal plan and a tax exemption, or antitrust exemption, I should say. So this is where they are. I mean, everybody's having to put $20 million into the coffers. Everyone's trying to survive. And the big guys, which we know who they are, have come up with another way to make more money from their television partners and ultimately squeeze the athlete dry, because these are no longer student athletes. They're paid mercenaries, aren't they?
Well, you know, as much as they get for their scholarships alone, which seems to be a forgotten, just ignored thing. Yeah, you're right. And now I'm like, well, hell, if I got to do all this work, I want to get paid like a pro, because that's what I am.
Well, and you know, for all I mean, there are those out there. I remember the ACC commissioner made a big stance about the health and well-being of playing all these additional games, but now there doesn't seem to be as much concern for that. And you nailed it. The more games you play, the higher risk you have to get hurt. And I think the thing that I need to hear more about is this SEC weekend, because you and I both know, I think I speak for you, that SEC championship game is sacrosanct. I mean, everybody convenes in the same place. We've been there for 31 years. It's a celebration. We honor legends. We have all kinds of activities. And now we're going to play 4 games at different sites to get into the tournament. I mean, how is that going to work?
Well, for one thing, that SEC championship, which we all saw, when I say we all, that's not true. We know the roots of it. We know what a gamble it was, and we know how Mike Slive he almost passed out until that interception. I mean, it worked out perfect. But it led the nation in a different direction. Everyone followed suit. And, you know, you got places down here, a lot of people don't realize this. Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, they don't know anything about pro sports. College football is that's a lot of people's deal down here. And they're just, and thank God, if you get rid of the SEC title game, I think you've done a huge disservice to college football.
And I'm not blaming anyone, because we're not there yet. They're throwing out ideas, but based on what Emerson said, these ideas have moved pretty far down the pike. Thanks for the call. Quick break. We have a couple of guests remaining, but mostly your reaction to this whiplash week of news concerning college football and the SEC.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
This is from Zim, recap of the first few minutes of the show, which sometimes is not that interesting. Today it was. Interesting dissent coming from SEC fans about the myriad of changes that could be in the wind. Let's move along and check in with Pedro in Texas.
Hey, Paul. This is Pedro from Tyler. How are you doing?
Hey, Pedro, we're doing great. Thank you.
Here's what I want to talk about is as someone who attended a home playoff game this year.
Right.
I paid three times the amount of my normal ticket price to watch to eat the same food, watch from the same position, do the same old thing. I think if we're going to expand upon that, they've lost my interest.
Yeah, Pedro, I was probably at that same game that you are talking about, and it just didn't feel quite right. And that was week one, I believe, of the playoffs. And by the end of it, it felt like Texas fans and everybody was fatigued. And I'm really glad to hear from you. And by the way, I am all for progress in college athletics, and I'm not faulting anyone. They are working through a fairly difficult playing field, and some of this may never happen, but the reaction, at least initially, and by the way, it can't be explained. It's not like we can grab Greg Sankey and have him explain every aspect, because it's not right now. It's all theoretical. You have the meeting next Tuesday in Dallas where the commissioners will hear what Petitti and Sankey have been talking about, and they may agree and they may not. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it very, very much. Let's check in with Fred, who is up next. Hey, Fred.
Hey, Paul. How are you doing?
We are doing great. Thank you.
That's good. I just want to talk to you about Alabama basketball.
Okay.
They lost to Missouri, so I don't know if you think they'll be doing pretty good this year.
I think they're really in a tough situation right now. But remember, they lost to the best team in the country, and then they lost to a team that is very difficult to win at home. So I'm not writing them off. They do have a big game tomorrow, though. I think it's essential that they get back on track against a very good team. Thanks for the call. They play Kentucky tomorrow. It's late February. You start to see trend lines, but as we talked to Coach Gates about it yesterday. We talked to Nate Oates a week ago before the big game. You're just trying to set yourself up. If you're a realistic coach, you look at the schedule. That goes for everyone, including Auburn. You know what you have in front of you, and you know you're probably going to lose some of the games, and you just have to be prepared for it. Thank you for the call. We are continuing with more of your calls, and Dan is up next in New York. Hey, Dan.
Good afternoon, Paul. How are you today?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a must-win game tomorrow. They have to beat Kentucky. You cannot lose 3 games in a row if you're Alabama. The defense has been miserable. These teams just keep, cutting back door and going inside, and Alabama just cannot stop it. And they need to play well. They need to play well on Saturday. And on top of that, Tennessee and Texas A&M is a pretty big game too. So who do you think is going to win that game?
Yeah, that game's in College Station?
Yes.
I would probably lean a little bit toward the home team.
Yeah, they're both great defensive teams. So, but anyway, this is a really rough stretch for
I
Alabama.
think you're right. Alabama is about an 8.5-point favorite tomorrow. What does that mean? It just means that the perception of the game is the betting public seems to feel comfortable where Alabama is, but I think they'll win. Kentucky has been erratic. They won to Tennessee. They've lost other places.
Right.
That's the beauty of this league right now. It's mildly unpredictable.
Yeah, it's been great. It really has. But it's been so competitive. Florida's good. All these teams are really good. So thank you for taking.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Florida's downright scary, I think. They're the team that not sneaking up on anybody, but they are. They're really scary. Trey is up next. Hey, Trey.
Hey, Paul. How are you?
We are doing great.
Hey, I want to try to correct something I said yesterday, and then I got a question for you about what's going on with college football. Paul, my point yesterday was I Alabama hasn't led the last two games. Both games they played, they have not had the lead. And I just think with so many turnovers all and a lack of defense, when they get behind, they can't get their way back in the ball game. I wasn't really upset about the loss. I'm more upset about the way the defense is playing.
But Trey, answer me this: in the Auburn game, they tied it. I believe they either tied it or came within a shot against Missouri. And you know this because you've officiated a million games. I've always felt when you're behind and you had better take that lead or you're never going to win, and that's what. As the second Alabama caught up to Auburn, it was like they went cold again. Missouri was a little bit different, but you exhaust so much energy getting back in the game.
I agree. Now, my question to you about this, getting rid of these games that are meaningless games that we don't like, Paul, if we do that, what's it going to do to the athletic departments of these smaller schools? Would you not see them as losing some of their athletic programs? Because these smaller schools, they depend on that big paycheck to keep their athletic programs running.
You are correct.
So I'm just
the MAC schools, in this case, Long Island, whatever that is, whether it's a T or a university, that's how they survive. And I don't mean to sound crass here, Trey, but that's not my problem. I want to watch good football games. I don't want to watch a 66-0 game. So Long Island can take $2 million back to New York.
Well, I would agree, and it would also take a lot of NIL money that these little smaller schools are getting. But I hope you have a great weekend. Looking forward to seeing you Monday, and I hope Alabama gets back on track.
You're back. I think it's a really interesting question because, and I don't mean to pick on Florida. They just happen to play the game that we're talking about. But everybody has these games, and do they really serve a purpose? So that's why I think it's essential that the SEC goes to 9 games. I mean, all the money they're getting from television, does television, do you really want to watch these games? If the Mercer games, some of the games are a little better than others, but where is the cutoff? Is there a Florida fan in America that wants to see that opener against Long Island? Yeah, you want to see DJ Lagway get a bunch of yards and receivers and running backs and the defense. They're stat games, but they're mostly unwatchable. Let's continue with more of your phone calls and check in with Burke in Chicago. Hey, Burke.
Good to talk to you, Paul.
Thank you.
Yeah, voice is kind of crazy. We were in Daytona over the weekend, and the best part about it was Mr. Trump flying by in his big airplane.
That is a big plane.
It was great, man. That plane is so quiet, despite how big it was. Real quick.
By the way, you think they put a Tesla motor in there?
You know what, man? They gave me a Ford Mustang, battery powered. It's like a fast, easy go.
I was, by the way, I was at an event it was when George W. Bush was president, and it was about 2 miles from the airport, and they told us. We all walked outside, and when Air Force One, we were literally in a landing pattern. It is scary when that thing flies over you.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, man. It flew in where we were at Perry's, but when we were at the track at the time, it showed up, and it was cool. But what I'm calling about is this. I'm just finding out, because I'm getting back to the world now, are they changing this whole platform of college football? Is that because of what Ohio State did when they ran roughshod through all 3 of those divisions? Or is this because they're seeding bad teams that turned out to be duds? Tell me all about it.
You know what it really is, Burke? I know it doesn't really have anything to do with Ohio State. I think it has everything to do with mostly the SEC, but the Big Ten to a certain degree. Because the Big Ten initiated this conversation about a year ago by getting automatic qualifiers. They wanted at one point either the SEC or the Big Ten to be guaranteed the number 1 seed in the tournament. Now, what I really think it is, and Wilner talked about it, it's a lack of confidence in this committee. And I heard plenty of SEC people talking, from Kirby Smart all the way to the commissioner, not specifically but indirectly, saying, what's the check and balance of this committee? And there really wasn't any.
All right. It seems kind of like our government right now. And all of a sudden they're handing out money that we lost. It just seems unstable. But as a Buckeye fan, it's we're looking forward to next year. I'm not too sure about this Matt Patricia guy. I remember what he did to Detroit. But we'll take it from there.
I don't think that's an improvement at the DC. Hey, thank you very much, Bert. Good to hear from you. We're up against a break. One more guest coming up in the next hour. We'll try to bring a little levity to the program. It's been a fairly grim week with all the news.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Head to the Zoom for the first time today. Brad is up next.
Oh, happy Finebaum Friday.
Yes, sir.
And I saw you making the rounds today, and I'm like you, Paul. I'm the idea that, I don't like automatic buys. I don't like conference championships. I like the best 12, 1 through 12, seed them out, tee it up, play ball. But I think we got to throw in, it's a caveat to that, I think we got to throw in some metrics. And my 3 are record, of course, strength of schedule that was really never considered last year, in my opinion. And then quality wins. Who have you beaten? What do you think about that, Paul?
Brad, I'm glad you said that because I felt last year the thing this committee refused to look at was your wins. Because I'm not going to give you a cliche, but it's been proven. Ole Miss losing to Kentucky, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma. You can lose on a bad day, but you can't beat someone if you're not any good. And this group of people, which drove me crazy and you crazy last year, and Kirby Smart even crazier, they don't look at that. They just completely disregarded that. All they cared about was Indiana had a fat record. And,
that's it.
And every time somebody said Indiana would be 7-5 in the SEC, they got shot down, but they would have been. With Georgia's schedule, Indiana wouldn't have won 7. They may not have won 7 games.
No doubt about it. You know something, man? If I had a stamp that said IU on it, and I caught that CFP chairman walking down the street, and I know he's a Littleton alum, I would have stamped that thing in red paint, and I would have plastered it right on his forehead so he'd have to wear that for about a couple of days because that was a sham putting this in. And what it did was it was a slap in the face to the SEC, and especially in particular Ole Miss, because we all know Ole Miss should have been in there before Indiana. We know that.
Yeah. Well, listen.
But hey, Paul, can I introduce you to the boss real quick? She wants to meet you.
I wish you would.
Come on, Kathy. You see Miss Kathy?
Kathy, I don't know if can you hear me, Kathy?
I can hear you.
What do you think of your husband taking down the bully and knocking the teeth out of Ari Wasserman?
I don't know anything about it. I do not follow football at all. I have other things going on.
Well, Kathy, I want to tell you, your husband is one of the great callers in Finebaum Show history, and what he did last week will forever be remembered in the annals of this show.
Thank you, Paul. You're too generous, and enjoy your weekend, brother.
Thank you, babe.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Kathy. So Kathy is apparently unaware of what happened. Is that possible? Does Brad have a secret life going on there? We'll find out. Chris, what do you think?
Hey, Paul, I know one thing, Paul. One thing for sure. Brad might get lucky tonight, Paul, with that last line you gave him. Hey, but Paul, man, I've been thinking, I've been just looking at the schedules, man. Do you realize that some teams like Georgia that play Clemson's first game of the year, and some teams like South Carolina that played North Carolina and Clemson in the same year, they're going to have 11 games against Power 4 conference teams, Paul.
Right.
And 9 of them is going to be in the SEC. So do you think they'll go away from scheduling some of the games or the rivalries or the opening games?
I think that's why they're going to argue they need these automatic qualifiers, especially with the SEC going to an additional game. But, I hope they don't because we don't want to see those crummy games.
You said crummy games, Paul. You keep saying crummy.
Well, Chris, you got Clemson playing South Carolina and Georgia last year. Do you want to see those directional games on your schedule?
Man, listen, I'd rather have Clemson. I'd rather have Georgia, South Carolina, the same year, Paul. Because the thing about it is, if you go 8-4, which you're gonna have a lot of teams in the SEC that go 8-4 with their schedules, and they mean 11 games they don't play somebody, Paul. So 8-4 might be a good record to get in the playoffs.
I agree.
And then you got people in the Big Ten. The same rules don't go for the Big Ten. It don't go for the Big 12. It don't go for the ACC.
No, I completely agree.
I can understand what they're doing. I can understand what they're doing, and it's gonna play out to be some better football too, Paul. We just got to see how it's gonna play out. But you have a nice day. Oh, bro, before I get off the phone, I heard Johnny B mention my name yesterday, Paul. And one thing about it, if you ever took a ride in an elevator with Johnny B, you got to get out and take a shower the next day. You have a nice day, Paul.
Wow. Walter is up next. Hey, Walter, go right ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
You're doing great. Thank you.
Think I'm going to bounce back, beat Kentucky tomorrow. I hope so.
My best guess would be yes. I think Alabama will win that game.
I have a question, Paul. Don't Alabama play a Hall Stadium football 2026 in Tuscaloosa? I think they do, don't they?
I believe they're on the schedule, yes.
Yeah, 2026, 27, you know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that game, the question is, will it stay? I hope it does, because that's going to be an amazing game anyway.